This is a myth or a fable, depending on how strict you are with those generic delineations. It is the archetypal counterpoint to equilibrium, which I'll link in the description. This is also from A Resistance of Letters, which I've been working on in order to make it public, or technically to publish it. 1. Once upon a time, there was a man who wanted infinity. He lusted for a pure potential, one that would expand perpetually inside him, transforming him into a crossroads of the possible. Looking at his life, he found that the pressures of daily living and the constant distractions of other people did nothing but frustrate his ambition. So he quit the town and wandered to the south and east, along the silver river running from the perfectly reflective lake. He then followed the source of this lake to the rivulets running from the mounts austere. At the foot of the mounts, the man cast off all his clothing and effects, and ascended into the thin air past the thinning trees. On his way up, it might be said that he confronted 5 magicians: a black mage, a red mage, a yellow mage, a tan mage, and then a 5th, whose color was like a combination of the other 4. Each wizened master proffered him a version of possibility, this one dense and that one quick, this one shimmering, that one clarifying, and then a possibility as wide and placid as the space between the stars. But the man found each lacking in some way. His pursuit was for the pure infinity, rarefied and flawless, the one beyond any given measure, quality, or type. In time, the man arrived at the very highest summit of the mounts austere, and there it was he sat, and closed his eyes, and emptied himself of everything but this prayer: "Give to me infinity, give to me infinity, give to me infinity," repeated over and again. For countless hours, untold days, innumerable months, and many, many years the man waited, ignoring wind and chill and undiluted sun, until a voice delivered him these words: "You shall be granted the infinity you seek upon one condition." "And what is this condition?" asked the man. "You will find your infinity only in the arms of another." Once upon a time, there was a woman who wanted herself. She wished to know herself completely, so that in every moment it would comfort her, through each difficulty it would guide her, in each relationship she would not lose it, but ever find it more and more hers. Yet, looking at her life, she saw that her self-knowing was far too tenuous, far too changeable. Constantly, her connection to herself was blocked by the situations she encountered. Every anxiety would dilute it. Every relation would obscure it. Every hour spent at work seemed only to stretch her and herself further apart. And so she decided to leave her life for a time and concentrate wholly on herself. Now, rather than trekking outward as did the man, the woman locked herself inside her room. She drew the blinds and plugged the cracks in wall and joint with sealing wax and rolled up towels. Then she lay upon her bed and drew her covers over her, and closed her eyes, and then commenced her inward journey. To the south her mind traveled, forging the babbling stream and crossing the field of spinning flowers. At the far side of that field she came to a wood, and before she stepped into it, she disrobed. And listen, she was not traveling with her body, and yet she was still clothed. Those clothes can then be thought of as her knowledge and her memory, whichever composed her properly toward the world, and yet formed an obstruction between how she acted and who she really was. Thus denuded, the woman entered the wood. It can be said that there she found 3 versions of herself, a curious version, a beautiful version, and a version at once wicked and wise. And each of these selves of her offered her an image of who she truly might be, but looking past their showing, the woman saw they did not offer her her one true self, but only aspects thereof. And so she shooed them off and lay within a thicket, within the wood, within her dream, and there, again closing her eyes, she prayed, "Give to me me, give to me me, give to me me." Time elapsed, but she was unaware of its passing. And then came a voice to her which spoke, "You will be given the self you seek upon one condition. Tell me how," she demanded. "You will find your true self only in the arms of another." The woman balked at this, as had the man, for another seemed to be the antithesis of both herself and his infinity. And yet, as had the man, the woman accepted these terms. Thus she rose from her bed, washed her hair just as the man had trimmed his, and then she returned to life in the town. 3. So it was they met, the one and the other did. This was in the town, in the marketplace, beneath the fountain at the center bit of the settlement. For years, both the woman and the man had worried over the eyes of others, seeking a hint of what they were each after, a hint or a capacity. But neither had stumbled on someone who might give them the one thing and the everything that had been promised in the arms of another. Then, one day, it was lunchtime, and one brought a quirt, and the other brought some cheese, and sitting on opposite sides of the Abyssinian fountain, they both realized they each only had half a meal. He was the first to stand, to fetch a loaf of bread from the baker a few paces off. When he returned to the Abyssinian fountain, he saw a lady staring at the fruit or cheese she held. He approached her and offered to share with her what he had, and she was kind enough to accept. They ate, without speaking. But when they were finished, they both knew. They knew by the quality of silence that took root in the space and the time that they just shared. It was a silence big enough, perhaps even bigger than was necessary. She moved her hand towards his, and he took it, and they began walking east until they came to a house upon a hill. It had been his house, or it had been her house, but once they stepped together into it, the house at once became theirs. Time. Time is the quickest of thieves and the most belated of benefactors. But in their time together, let us say 4 years, what they expected did not show itself. And after half that long, arguments began to ignite the shavings made by doors hung too snugly in their frames, the bits of paper piled in the form of news and receipts and lists of things to get rid of and to attain. Misunderstandings and disappointments smoldered noiselessly in the year's daily detritus, producing a steadily thickening cloud that worked to smother their shared life. Finally, it was unavoidable. Neither she nor he were on the right path. And so she moved her hand away from his, and he felt cold for a moment and tried to catch her. But she did not want him. She did not want the feel of his arms. She wanted herself, and the fact was that he could not give it to her. He said, "Listen, in town there is a master. He is known for his ability to craft exactly what is asked of him. I do not think a mere man can craft what I seek," she said. "Neither do I, but heed. Perhaps he can help us to be together. Perhaps he can craft for us a way that will lead us toward what we are after. She thought about this, looking long out the window, past the wall that surrounded their estate, and gazing listlessly at what lay beyond that wall. Then she nodded, and together they walked into town. They came to the master's shop. He was busy, but they waited. When he was available, they explained their situation, and as the master listened, his eyes grew sharp. When they were finished speaking, he paused for a moment, and then he said, "I might be able to construct such a thing as would help you, but to be honest, its price is likely to be more than your gain." "Likely is not so," said the woman, and the man agreed with her. "Very well," replied the master. "I will come to your place in a fortnight with both the construct and the price." "Good, good," they said, taking their leave and returning to their home, making ready for their solution. 4. Part 1. There was a knock on the door. On the evening of the 14th day, the man and woman rushed to answer it and let the master in. He followed them into the dining room. On the table he sat a large box and opened it to reveal 46 masks. The husband and wife looked on these masks with quizzical expressions. The master explained, "I have crafted for you 2 sets of 22 masks, 2 for each hour of the day, excepting noon and midnight. For at noon there is this mask, made of clearest glass. It is to be worn by the man alone. At the stroke of midday, he is to remove himself and fit this over his face, and for the duration of 1 hour, he will commune with his infinity." "And what of myself?" pressed the woman. "Presently, we will come to that. At the end of the 12th hour, the man will return into the house, and again you will take up your dual masks. They will relate you one to the next in harmony with one another. Then, at the stroke of midnight, the woman will remove herself and place upon her face this mask, made of mirror. For that hour, lady, you will know yourself." Both the man and the woman were amazed at the efficacy of the master's work. But then the master's face grew dark, and solemnly he spoke. "There is still the matter of the cost." "Whatever it is," they answered, "we shall pay it in full." "Yes, yes. And as for the cost, in this instance it is perfectly equal to your gain. And the cost is? It is nothing more nor less than your firstborn child." Those words hung over the table for some time. Neither the man nor the woman could answer or barter or even make word to refuse the master. The masks had already become their way, their path, their prize, and they knew there could be no refusing. The master stood and bowed to them, and then he left their house. As soon as he crossed the threshold, both man and woman found the masks proper to that hour and fit them upon their faces and began again to be together. For Part 2. It was as the master said. For the hour of noon, removing himself to the yard and back, casting off his clothes, and laying on the grass with the mask of glass upon his face, the man would partake of his infinity. And 2, for the midnight hour, the woman, masked in mirror and lain out recumbent on their balcony, communed with her own self. As well, for the hours between, they were pacified, and their passions calmed, and all argument became a subset of their communication. All anger and irritability was given constellation among their hours of work and rest. And if their story ended here, perhaps a romance it would be, with nothing needful for us to attend to in what the master wrought. Yet one day, without really meaning to, the woman stumbled on the man as he lay naked in their yard, naked but for his mask. She saw him, unseeing, unhearing, untasting, unbreathing, beneath the apex of the day. And she saw that part of him called his self, and it was pointing like the most explicit sign upward toward the sun. Inside her, she felt a burning need to know him, to know that self of his. And so she approached him and lifted her dress and scaled up his law as though it were a mountain. And there, upon the summit he gave rise to, she found what he spent his life seeking, which was his so-called infinity, which to her was an absolute variation. When the man woke from his powerful hour, he felt his gift more fully than he ever had before. He covered his nakedness and returned to the day with his wife, who mentioned nothing of their stolen lie. And yet, later, as his wife was at her self-knowing, the man, who usually spent that hour staring at the fire in their red-bricked hearth, he was overcome with a pressure that compelled him from his seat and up the stairs, then out the window and higher, higher, up the shingles of the roof to where the woman lay, masked and naked, revealed and hidden beneath the stealthing moon. She was blind to him and deaf to him, and she could not sense him at all. And what was it that his eyes were drawn to? Why, they landed on a forest, and to a thicket hidden in that forest, which was so dark it could contain anything at all. Oh, he felt overwhelmed by the need to know her secret depths, for they seemed to him more surfeit with the possible than anything he had ever come across. Thus into her dark place he placed himself, chasing after that hidden thing behind her reflective mask. And all at once he knew it, he tasted it, what she coveted. And to him it was not so much a self as it was significance personified. 5. Sometime later, the woman discovered she was with child. Once she confessed this to her husband, he took that hour's mask from off his face and then from hers, and he embraced her and he said, "We need these filters no more. We shall live our life honestly and intimately from now on, knowing how to and having a purpose beyond our own pursuits. We will return this device to the master when he comes to collect his payment and pay him something for his trouble, and then all will be well." The woman could not refrain from weeping a little, feeling a love for her husband and the family they had begun. And from that love she experienced a great increase of her person. Indeed, the man, too, received something beyond his expectations. Through his love of the woman and the lamb that she carried, he knew a timelessness and a perpetual expansion that stretched his knowing far beyond his present tense. And thus they went, glowing, content, preparing for their child, masklessly. 6. The moment of delivery came. The man made ready as best he could the blankets, the warm water, and the words of comfort for the woman, who yielded at length their son into the world. As soon as the child arrived, the woman, her eyes awash in tears, felt the presence of the master, who had caused her husband to fall into forgetting. The master held her child and waited, looking down on her. Again, her body was racked with pangs, and from her Lou issued another child into the world, this second, a daughter. She saw her twins held in the master's arms, and she recognized at once herself and also her husband's infinity. Please, she begged, do not take them. The master answered, I cannot unmake what I have made for you and for your husband. In turn, I cannot return the materials to their place any more than you can return these children from whence they came, nor may I erase the skill that has dissolved the disharmonies of your shared life. Then take me instead of my children, for I know myself now, and this knowing is more valuable than what my children have yet become. The master considered this, and he replied, It is true that you are richer than your daughter on account of your experience, but it is verily your husband's son's newness that I require to rectify the balance. Then leave her and take me, that I may watch over my son, and so that my husband will have some measure of solace in his loss. Very well, said the master, who set down the girl and took the boy and the woman from the house that stands to the east of town. The man awoke to crying. He knew not what had happened. He surveyed the room, and there was blood everywhere. He lifted the sodden sheets to find his daughter wailing and squirming and nearly purple with rage. He took her in his arms and washed her and swaddled her, feeling the edge of a great devastation growing within him, but staving this off as he tended the babe, lulling her with a finger placed upon her lips, his mind empty and his heart crushing inward. 2 quotes, and this is done. Genius is infinite patience. Thus spoke Michelangelo. And the Quran says, impatience is the very stuff of which man is made. Good night. I'll talk to you soon.